My name is Troy Uphoff. I farm in East Central Illinois with my parents and my brother Trent. Happy to be here today. I want to talk to you all today about high yield and what we're doing on our farm to produce those yields. So let me start from the beginning. The genesis of our high yield plot started in 2020, the first year of COVID. And we had time to sit back and reflect on what we were doing at the farm and how we can do it better. And one of the biggest standout on that was, how can we increase yields, not for ourselves, but for each and every one of you? So which playbook did we pull out? It was Dr. Dole and his 7 wonders. So essentially, we have taken his 7 wonders of corn yield from beta stage here at the farm and taken it to our farm to trial. And we could not have done it without, obviously, his support and the support of his students, which we all think the world of. And if you are looking to hire one of them, they're excellent hires. And if not, then I'm sure my parents would hire them at Uphoff Farms. I mean, we think the world of them. So I'm going to pass it over to my good friend Andy Dole from Mattoon.
Hello, everyone. I am Andy Dole from Mattoon. That's south of here, about 45 miles. For those of you who are familiar with the area, we kind of farm in Coles, Shelby, and Cumberland, glacial moraine, a lot of variability. We can see Troy in God's country, but we don't get all the fun of raising the high yielding corn. So I don't know that I necessarily belong in the NCGA discussion or high productivity, but I am happy with what we've done on our farm for more of an everyday ground level approach to raise our average yields over time. And I hope I can maybe provide some criticism and some reality to some of the high aspirations out here.
And Lance Starkione is my name. I was in Dr. Bealo's class, I think, in 91, I think,
We have an age
roughly. So, yeah. And so I've known Dr. Bealo for my entire career as an agronomist, plus here as a student. Also farm, so when I get to sneak away from my day job at Bear as an agronomist, I farm in western Illinois, so the part of the state that you guys ignore, there is no testing location in western Illinois. I farm in Fulton, Knox, McDonough, and Warren County, and I have followed Dr. Bealo's work closely for years. My job as an agronomist for the Calvin Agro is to be a technical resource advisor, if you will, to customers, thankfully, that choose to plant our products and have success with our products. So happy to be here with you today.
All right, thanks so much for our panelists introducing themselves. So I have the first question for you, and I'm going to keep this open-ended, but when you think about the things for high yield and what management factors you're changing, and those 7 wonders, if that's where you're pulling from, what area on the farm do you think has made the biggest jump in yield? So is it the utility management, your hybrid selection, how you're planning your density, but what's the factor you've changed that you think has made the biggest jump in yields on the farm? And I think this first question will start in the same order we introduced, and then we'll start to shuffle the deck a little bit. So you're looking for one item. To start, one. Yeah, it's hybrid. Farmers like technology in the seed, and that technology that has been brought to us through seed companies has been phenomenal the last, I'm going to say 50 years, but bringing it forward, we've seen a tremendous jump in that in the last 10 years especially. From stature of corn to root development to plant health, definitely my number one is hybrid selection and hybrid corn.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree that hybrid and variety are not the most important developments for us on the farm. Obviously, that's outside of our control as a farmer, but seeing replicated trials in the field, data from universities to be able to tell what has the most potential. We've got Troy next door growing non-irrigated 350 plus bushel corn. Some days the only thing we get right is lunch, but he does that. Soybean varieties capable of 200 plus bushels. It's out there. We just have to see how we can bring those yields back to our farm.
You have a favorite brand, right?
I do, but I'm not going to try to let that show here today. So I'm going to go a different direction. I'm going to say information is the thing that to me has improved the most, because we understand what each area of each field, if you're doing things right, is producing, and the questions that generates to me as an agronomist. Why is this spot so much better than that one? what's the difference? It's the same hybrid, same management, same field. You know, everything's the same except for the environment's different in that field, and the insights that we learn from being able to understand that, I think, provide a lot of value.
So I'd like to follow up with the next question. I'll stick with you, Lance. You heard where a lot of our research is looking at fertilizer placement. It's very difficult to do. Well, how are you fertilizing? Have you looked at any fertilizer placement?
I mean, the growers that I work with, the way I do it on the farm at home, I mean, it varies tremendously from one operation to the next. I do have, you talked about my brand bias. I have a strip till bias as well. I think, bar none, some sort of strip till system is the best way to raise corn. But the practicalness that you mentioned earlier, one of the possible P's, was an incorrect answer. Not all of my fields are really, it's not really practical to do it, or you might not have access to the equipment. But I think if you're looking for something to change on your operation and you have the ability to access that equipment or own it yourself, and also having the ability to apply nutrition, because most strip till that's done in the state today is not really done with nutrition, because that equipment is even more expensive, even more hard to manage, and even harder to find the versions of those tools that can do that. So, you know, I would say what farmers are doing to, you know, manage their fertility on their farm in combination with their tillage, which strip till enables you to do both, I think is big.
Any fertilizer placement was the question.
Yeah, so on fertilizer placement, on our high yield plot, with any high yield plot, you have to find, and if you're going to compete, you have to find the area through technology that is going to show you where those areas are at. And in our case, on our farm, we have high fertility ground with a 4.0 organic matter and P levels between 75 and 100 and K levels north of 400 because we used to have a hog farm.
That's pounds, right?
And that's correct. So essentially, you find that spot and you take it from there and accelerate. Now, looking into 2025 and seeing the data that we know, we are seeing that strip till is definitely something we need to be looking at in 2025, along with fertility 2 over and 2 down, or in furrow and moving to some sort of 20 inch. Now, will that be the whole farm? Absolutely not, but that is a direction that we feel we'll need to go to.
Yeah, so this is a very relevant question to us all. I have more of the everyday approach on it to kind of look at our farms and say, what is the lowest hanging fruit in our current management strategy? For our operation, 5 or 6 years ago, we were still putting all of our in and through anhydrous in the fall, and we were seeing on very wet years variability where that was not exactly the best approach. And doing simple changes like that, splitting nitrogen, better management, has made leaps and bounds. Now, the data is very clear from Dr. Below and the physiology lab here that there are further improvements we can make. Now, I always like to compare farmer decision making to the disease triangle. For those of you who are familiar, you've got 3 aspects as a farmer to consider as you move forward, as you invest and upgrade your operation. Those aspects are agronomics, which are very clear here. We see clear yield data, replicated trials that show there are benefits to a lot of these different management strategies. However, where things get a little muddy on the farm is the other 2 sides, logistics and then economics. And sometimes logistics can be enough to shy you away. Sometimes the economics can shy you away. And so we have to keep looking at the information and the data here to say, what is the clear long-term solution for our farm? Now, if your logistical reason for not doing something is trying to go to the lake, that's not a good excuse. But the economics are usually a little more clear.
Just to follow Andy's comment there, we were talking earlier, neither one of us have in furrow or 2 over 2 down fertility right now, because economically in the past it simply hasn't worked for our type of soils. Our fathers, we did not see it. However, as yields accelerate and move higher and higher, that increase of 2 to 5 bushels per the acre in the past that we really couldn't track, as yields go up, it's becoming more evident that we need that.
So as you look at it pushing for high yields, right, you've talked about hybrids number one for your list, the information and understanding what you can do with that. You like strip till and placement. Is there one practice that is a must for you on your high yield acres? I mean, every year it's in the plan and something that you think has made a big change on bulk acres that you would recommend for higher yield pushing systems. If you had to pick one practice, what's it going to be?
Yeah, so obviously very relevant. Something that we've begun to plan on our farm every year when we're prepaying for our inputs, our crop protectants, is corn fungicide. With the newest generation of corn fungicides, whether it be BSF products, Syngenta products, you definitely see a much more consistent response long term, and ultimately it's become less of a questionable decision. And there's also intangible factors that are hard to account for, whether it be standability at harvest and things of that nature. So those corn fungicide in particular is something that we've just begun to apply on every acre without a doubt, without questioning it. Now, you look at grain prices, you might be a little shied away from that. I can't blame you, but it's easier to just accept that it's probably the best management strategy regardless of year and move forward.
So differing from Andy on my number one, it's going to be in-season nitrogen. Definitely, we used to all be 140 units, one and done in the fall. All the retailers are here. One and done, I got my 160, 140 on with Insert, on my bean stubble, I'm done. That's good. Today, all that 140 is, it is a base for us to go off of. So that base of 140 has now grown into 45 units with our chemical as a carrier, along with our herbicide, and then following up with a side dress application of 45 units. So in the past, we have only done one application moving forward, and that's on all of our acres too, by the way. So we have moved to 200 actual units on every acre in 3 different times. So in-season nitrogen and nitrogen application.
And don't feel attacked when I say this, but I'm going to put my number one practice into a catch-all category I call do no harm. And I work with a lot of growers that have very good intentions to buy the best product, do the best management, and then they do something in the spring, such as if you ever heard somebody say, well, I had to open it up to dry it out. Or maybe you planted it a couple days earlier than you should have. And we have a lot of good intentions that sometimes it's logistics, sometimes it's convenience. It's really hard to be patient, as you all know. And this spring, I watched a lot of people lose their freaking mind when it came to being patient about Mother's Day. And you were very patient through April. Once it got past Mother's Day, I ain't got time to be patient no more. And so we do lots of things that undo good agronomy some days.
Do no harm. Yeah, that's a good one. So let's talk population. So Lance, what's the highest population that you could manage on your farm or your area?
I upgraded to a planter that can do variable rate about 2 growing seasons ago, and I'm still on 30-inch rows, so I'm a little old school there. I would say in 30-inch rows with variable rate capabilities, I would say 44 is about the furthest I would push it, and that's risky. As you risk versus reward, as you push populations higher, the chances of something bad happening do go up. If you're in a static rate seeding, not stripping, not varying your population, I'd say probably not higher than 38 or 40 if you're going to plant the whole field at one population, and you'd have to have some good fields like Troy's got to get that high. But I think we can go higher than what people think in a 30-inch row if it's variable rate stripping.
So population. On our farm level, it's a flat 35 to 36,000. There is some variance between hybrids, but not very much. On my type of soil and part of Andy's soil, no variable rate. It's all just one pass. On my high yield environment, we planted 40,000 this year, and we have between 37 and 38,000 actual stand.
Like Troy, we're also pretty blanket management on our population. On depending on the ear type of the corn, whether it's Bayer genetics, Corteva genetics, the individual characteristics, we will change our population on the higher end with some of the Bayer stuff, 37 to 38,000. On the lower end, some of the more flexible Corteva genetics Pioneer, 34 to 35,000. One thing we've seen on our farm, particularly on the more marginal acres, less productive ground, is actually, although our higher end has moved up over the last decade, our lower end has also moved up tremendously, where on a farm that maybe would be considered drought prone in a dry year, you would maybe bump the population down to 30 to 32. We've seen better return by keeping those populations higher, even if there's a risk of dry weather maybe having some negative side effects, but keeping that minimum baseline of 34,000, even 35, depending on the hybrid in the farm.
I'd add quickly, Troy's comment on minimal differences between hybrids, that's true. We do a lot of research looking at how hybrids respond to population, and some people get really energetic about talking about the differences between hybrids. The differences in the optimal population for the yield level are far more relevant than the optimal population for the hybrid. So as populations vary maybe 10,000 based on yield potential, they vary maybe 2,000 to 3,000 at most based on different genetics in the hybrid. So it actually, as I vary populations, it's got a lot more to do with what I consider to be the productivity of the spot in the field than it does the particular hybrid I'm playing.
Any questions from the crowd for the panel? Yep, I knew we'd have a few. All right, your hand was up first.
So your question is based around weeds, the height of them, and then what type of yield loss might occur in our own study. So I go back to the field marshal. They're in the back. And two things. We like our fields to be clean. On corn, this year I used 2 passes of Lexar, one down with 45 units of nitrogen, followed by our second pass with Lexar later on, so our fields are clean. Soybeans are the same way, 2 passes. So we feel that any sort of competition in the field against that plant can cause a yield loss. Andy?
I have a varied opinion on that. The one thing I would say, if you're curious about that on your farm, don't try it on our farm, is be certain that it's just because your soybeans are growing taller, that they just don't have longer nodes to compete, and they're not actually the same or less yield than before. The second point being is that water hemp in particular, the bigger you let it get, the harder it is to kill. So might be something to try a little more with a cover crop in particular. I don't know that I would advise letting water hemp compete with your beans, because that's a tough SOB to take care of.
Yeah, I see the field marshal's ready to go there, but real quick. So yeah, I'm not aware of any research I've ever seen indicating that any weed competition, at best weed competition is going to not impact yield. I've never seen any research to indicate that weed competition at any level increases yield potential, and the field marshal may speak to this. My biggest concern with letting weeds compete is that means we haven't even tried to control them pre, and that means we're relying more on post-emergence weed control. We need to rely less on post-emergence weed control if you want to have good weed control. If you want to strive for an Indiana or Missouri level of weed control, maybe that's not as important. But to get what Central Illinois has come to expect for weed control, I want to start with a pre that's capable of 90% weed control, because I only trust my post program to control 10% of the weed.
It's funny you mentioned Illinois versus Indiana, because actually just recently the Illinois Weeds team beat Purdue at the Weeds competition. So let's get a round of applause for that.
If you cross the line, it gets weedier.
It does.
I just got back to get weedy.
It is weedy over there. And I promise that was not a plant, because it's funny. That is exactly one of the projects I am running with Dr. Velo and Dr. Sybil. We're looking at both corn and beans on letting prolonged weed interference and how that interacts and affects yield in both progressive and standard management systems. So at the end of this year, we should have some stronger data and actual yield data that may depict that story a little bit of like, if you let the weeds go a little bit longer, does it affect your yield in a positive, negative manner? And how does that also affect when you're adding fertility or not as much fertility or foliar program, anything along those lines in these systems? So thank you for the question. That was very cool.
All right, got another one. I'm going to use the mic this time. We'll go here, got a few more, and then we'll get lunch, and then we'll keep the conversations going.
Just was curious what you guys are doing for residue management.
Yep, good question. That was going to be mine.
Personally, I'm not a believer that residue has to be decomposed. It needs to be out of the way. So I like to move residue. I'm a no-tiller, been a devout no-tiller most of my life, was raised by a no-tiller. We do very little tillage on our farm. I do strip till where I can, which makes residue management easier because there's no residue in the strip. And as long as your residue is not interfering with germination or emergence or root growth, I don't particularly think it's harmful. So I don't really necessarily spend a lot of time trying to, bury it, destroy it, chop it up, eliminate it, decompose it. I just want it out of the competition zone with the plant.
Yeah, I agree with Lance on that. One takeaway, in 2023, we have found that our best stands have came from by chiseling in the fall. Because it was deep chiseled, we didn't have a lot of weather over the winter to do freeze and thaw or any sort of breakdown on that. So the farms that we chiseled last fall are most likely going to create that highest yield. Andy.
My short answer is probably not enough. Like a lot of you guys, we run a light BT pass vertical till in the fall to kind of chop and size everything. Give us the possibility of a stale seed bed for soybeans in the spring if we want. I think a lot of us need to look into some of these biological products, whether you believe in them or not. Some of these stock decomposition chemicals out here have a lot of validity in what they can offer us and provide nutrients back into the soil.
Curious, what is your whole farm 3-year average on corn and beans?
Don't quote me on this, probably on corn, 230-ish dry, and beans, probably low 70s. Again, I'm not a high yield guy, so.
Troy needs to go last.
Go ahead.
So I'm not really a high yield guy either. I like to be efficient. I farm a lot of lighter ground. I'd say honest corn, probably 225. I have had some of my best bean years the last 3 years, so we probably would be an honest 70 on soybeans.
All right, so farm level, 235 to 240 the last 3 years on corn. Now, obviously, that's taking out some lows because I think in Dr. Velo's presentations, he often talks about weather.
I didn't know taking out lows was an option.
Yeah, so it'd be 240, but I can also say on the technology side, we have farms that are pushing 250, 260. But then also we have areas like a little town called Moequa, Illinois last year that had 6 weeks with no rain. So that brought it back to the 180. So a 240 average is pretty well logistics for the last 3 years. And from a farm management perspective, you see the yields, 230 to 240. Soybeans, 70 to 72. Have we seen 80, 85, 87? Absolutely. 2 years ago, that dry period we had in August, Lance, 60, 62, 64, very common number for Class A drummer Flanagan in central Illinois. Ready for the next one. We have another question in the crowd?
We got time for one more.
I need a hand in the
Right
air.
here.
I'm back here. I need a hand in the air.
In our area, like out of the 3 the last 4 years, we've seen a lot of vomitoxin issues. Are you guys dealing with anything like that? Or not? Yeah, there's a lot of things out there that are frustrating, hard to solve problems, and that would be one of them. We have not in Western Illinois. It's been more of an issue in Eastern Illinois and in Indiana. I've got a friend and former colleague of mine that farms in, kind of in that Purdue area of Indiana, and they just had awful troubles with that. So there are some genetic differences based on husk coverage of hybrids. There are, insects that are potentially involved in some of that. That's one that's oftentimes environmentally influenced, and there just probably needs to be more basic research done. That's not a very sexy area of research. Not a lot of work has been done, and for a period of time, diplodia seemed in my geography like it was going to be the thing that impacted corn production the most, and it's largely been a non-issue for many years. For I have no idea why reasons. Some of it we changed our cropping practices, so sometimes it's cropping practices that influence that. Sometimes it's genetics. A lot of times it's environment. Management can to a certain extent, but on some of those issues, I'm not sure we even know what management practices we might accidentally be doing to make the problem worse. And I sympathize with people that struggle with that, because there's nothing worse than raising a good crop and finding out it's not marketable.
On the vomitoxin, I definitely would have concurred with Lance on that. In my opinion, it came down to a period of weather and then, of course, the hybrid selection.
I don't have much more to add. I think the last time we saw vomitoxin was probably in the Great Drought of 2012.
All right, thanks for those questions. We're gonna close it there. Or Adam, you got a quick one? Quick answers?
I just got a quick one. I want to know a little bit about your conversation about manual loss. When do you guys like to start harvesting your corn?
Yeah, you can comment on phantom yield loss too.
Yeah, so phantom yield loss, great question. So NCGA plots, they are taken out between 25 and 28%, because it is an optimum time with the least amount of loss. From a farm level, each and every one of us farms more acres every year, and we always try to become more efficient. So from a dryer perspective, we're starting between 28 and 30% every year. May not be a lot, but we start, and it definitely makes us more efficient. The rule of thumb on the farm would be to try not to get below 18%. You get below 18 and nothing good happens after that. It's like 12 o'clock at night. Nothing good happens in Champaign after 12 o'clock at night. Andy, you can top that.
Well, our farm isn't exactly equipped with any fancy dryer setup, so we like to pick our corn when it's below 20% to store in the bins over winter. We get the opposite of phantom yield loss, the bottom end. Usually by the time we're done cutting beans, some of that stuff's going in at 13%, 12%. So we're losing a little bit on the bottom there, but it's just kind of the way we're set up.
Yeah, so our farm, I farm by the do as I say, not as I do method oftentimes. I don't make a living as a farmer, so we harvest way more dry corn than I want to. My dad always loved it when it was coming out of the field at 16, and always told me when I was trying to get him to go earlier, you can't guarantee me that it's going to fall down if we wait, but I can guarantee you if I pick wet corn, I'm going to have to buy a lot of dryer gas. And that's how my dad made his harvest decisions. But and in regards to phantom yield loss is real. Phantom is a myth. There is no phantom to it. It's mostly physical loss, and I was really excited to see their good data that supported that, because that's what I've kind of always believed. And as most of you that know me know, I don't need to have data to support what I say, but it is nice when I do.
All right. Well, thank you.
Data.
It was a great panel. They will be sticking around if you have further questions. We have one more thing. I think, Troy, you have one more question we want to ask, right? Is there anything else you want to lead through? Yeah.
Yeah, so let's, in closing, last week I had the opportunity to go out to South Dakota, and we've all been noticing all of the water that we've been getting, the high yield environments that we have, and the moisture that's in the air even this morning. As Andy said to me earlier, he said, well, Troy, it's a plot day. Of course it's going to rain. So what do we need to do for that? And it's fungicide. That is a very critical step right now. So economically, if you've never put on fungicide before, please put on one pass. I'm not going to go company specific on that, but please put on one pass. On the NCGA yield plot and what we're doing there, we put on 3 applications because we do not want those plants to have a bad day. So I start off, my first pass is Veltima at V10. Let's see, we go with the Bear product, Delaro Complete, and then we're going to finish that with Mervis Neo here in about 2 weeks. So the plants do not have a bad day, and with the type of conditions that we are in right now, I think it's definitely economically worth that. So I can't thank you all for having me enough today. My friends at Country Financial, we were talking about how we take off the highs and the lows. Whenever you have that low, it's definitely good to have crop insurance. So it's a great benefit, and definitely want to thank Dr. Bilo and his team for everything they have helped me with personally on achieving that high yield, and my parents, and of course my mentor Charlie Adams that's here today. Thank you.
We're going to expect even a higher yield this year, Troy, given the weather, so we're really excited to see what that is. Thank you so much for these questions and sticking out to the end. I think our thinking.
We got one more thing.
Yeah, this one, you don't know about this one.
No, I don't.
Yeah, so we're off the rails. And now you're getting nervous and looking at me like a father would look at a son.
I'm nervous. Okay.
So we have something for you from our family to yours, and to you and the team at the Crop Physiology Lab. This is one of our NCGA National Corn Winning Trophies that we would like to give to you and your team.
Well, that is certainly not expected, but hugely appreciated. And I think it fits the theme of got yield well. I really appreciate that. Don't deserve it, but we'll take it. So, hope we help you guys get the yield.